out of an abundance of caution. For the past 2 years, I have had to move our baptisms here at the Church of St. Mary from the big font to the smaller baptismal bowl, the old bowl, I like to call it, the one that was present here at the Church of St. Mary when I was a baby priest back in 1990. So imagine how it brought me back to those days as I had to dig out the bowl and dust it off. Because, well, that would be the bowl where we would be baptizing children, at least for the time being. And so it was about a year ago, gathered in the back by the baptismal font, but not at the font, but by the baptismal bowl. We were busy doing the prayers that needed to be done. And the time came for us to baptize the infant. And the parents, why, this was their third go-around of doing this, so they were relaxed and they knew exactly what to do. And so they brought their son and they placed his head over the baptismal bowl. And I pronounced the words like they're supposed to be pronounced. I baptize you in the name of the Father, and poured the water the first time. And the little infant boy, why, at that very moment, spit out his pacifier and it landed in the baptismal bowl. And the parents exclaimed, "Well, that was more than I was hoping for today." "You and me both," I quickly replied. And I said, "Who would have thought it? A pacifier without original sin." Amazing. And then we went with the second washing and the third. I think this year for Lent, you and I should give up all of our pacifiers. You ever thought about that? Pacifiers, we know what they're meant for. Why, they're to plug the hole. Because they certainly provide us, and they provide infants, absolutely, positively no nourishment. We don't get any nourishment from sucking out a pacifier. But it does plug a hole. And I think oftentimes when you and I, when our lives seem to be getting a bit empty, there's the temptation, of course, that is always there then for you and I to grab a hold of the most comfortable pacifier we can find and to suck for all it's worth. Because that's what comes naturally to us. So I would invite us during this season of Lent, if we're going to give something up, how about if we give up pacifiers? No, parents, you don't have to do that for your infants. God knows you need them for your sanity. And your baby needs them for comfort. But don't you think once we become older that we should be able to give up the pacifiers? And that's what this first Sunday of Lent invites us to do. It invites us to go into the desert. It invites us to enter into the wilderness. And this season of Lent invites us to recognize that there is nothing too little or too small that we shouldn't give up. We should be willing to give up, even if it's that daily craving that we have for chocolate. But these 40 days then invites us as we go into the wilderness and to confront these cravings that we have, these pacifiers that we grab a hold of and suck for all that's worth, to spend some time and to ask ourselves, when we go down that path, when we find ourselves thinking about that particular pacifier, whatever it is that we rely on so desperately in life, to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Why is this happening? What is going on in us that we have this craving for a Mars bar. Sometimes we feel like a nut, I know. Sometimes we don't. But the reality is there's still this craving that is within us. And we need to spend more time during this season of Lent sitting with that feeling of why is it that I want this? Why is it that I think that I need this? Rather than trying to fix this, which is our natural tendency, right? As we begin the season of Lent, we think it's about fixing all of those sins and temptations that we have in our life, and that we can just somehow make everything good again. I would suggest that we not be so eager, but rather we be more attentive. Sit with the feelings that are happening when you and I are tempted to have and or to do certain things, and try to answer the question, why does this happen? Why do I feel the need to always go down this path or this direction? And if the answer is, because I am hungry, what's so bad about being hungry? Or maybe the answer is, because I'm lonely. What is so bad about being lonely? Or maybe it's because I'm upset. What is so bad about being upset? We need to answer, and we need to ask, and we need to answer the questions if we ever hope to try to figure out what it is that's leading us down that path to begin with. And if we are attentive, and if we sit with those pacifiers and those temptations long enough, those things that we are trying to give up, if we sit with them long enough, we'll hear a voice. And the voice will try to tell you and I that by giving up that pacifier, by giving up that temptation, we're going to starve. Or we're going to go nuts. Or even worse yet, you're not going to be your fullest you. That's what the voice is going to try to tell us. And if we don't fall into that trap, then the voice will come to level 2. And the voice will then try to convince you and I that it's not a pacifier at all. It's a power tool. Don't you know the difference? And if it's a power tool, in order to be cool, in order to be trendy, in order to keep up with the Joneses, you gotta have this, or otherwise your life and my life are going to be miserable. It'll be like standing in a lava waste. And so the voice will try to convince us that it's something we absolutely positively got to have, like a power tool. And if we don't fall into that second level trap, then the voice will persist, and it will go to level 3. And the voice will then try to convince us of this fact. If you really love God, and if God really loves you, then you should be able to do whatever you want. If God really loves you, then you should be able to do whatever you want. And if you're ever wondering, my friends, where that voice is coming from and whose voice that is, I would invite you to read Luke's gospel story that we just heard again. And it will tell you whose voice it is. It is the evil one. It is the devil. It is the one who is trying to convince us that these pacifiers, these temptations that we so oftentimes seem to fall into because somehow they give us comfort, he's going to try to convince us. He's going to try to convince us that it's a power tool. That if we don't have it, we're going to go nuts. Or that we're not going to be our truest, fullest selves. Or that perhaps if we don't give into it, perhaps it means that God really doesn't love us. My friends, none of this is true. Jesus understood that. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone shall you serve. So you and I, on this first Sunday of Lent, need to ask ourselves, what God will we worship this Lent? Will it be the gods of competition, of jealousy? Will it be the gods of envy and retribution and retaliation? Or will it be the God of forgiveness, the God of joy, the God of grace, the God of love? We need to realize that with God, everything is possible for us. But only when you and I hang on to God like Jesus did in his time of hunger and famine in the desert. You and I should not settle for anything less than the abundance of God's grace that he has ready and in store for you and I as we enter into these days. So let us give up all those pacifiers, even if they are holy and without original sin.